Welcome to the Living Ageless and Bold podcast. Each episode, I bring you amazing women who inspire, educate, and share their experiences and journeys along the way. So grab a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, find a cozy spot, and let's relax and have some fun hearing what can be accomplished after 55. Welcome, everybody. So my guest today is Eva Nguyen Whitfield. And if you met her at school or at happy hour tonight, she's just your average mom. She works, she's married, she lives in the suburbs. But when you dive a little deeper and you hear about her story that happened 50 years ago that changed her life, you will be so moved. Her book is called Uncommon Cargo, and it tells the story of her family escaping Saigon. They believe they were the last, if not one of the last flights out to get her here to the United States. And we're going to talk about her journey today. So welcome, Eva.
Good morning. Hi, Christina. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh my gosh. So, and I didn't mean like just average normal person, but you're like all of us working moms.
I take it as a compliment.
Okay. Right. We are working moms. We can do it all. But your story of this, what happened to your family 50 years ago, first of all, what inspired you? You were 3 years old, so you probably don't have a lot of vivid memories of this, but what inspired you to write Uncommon Cargo?
Well, Christina, there are actually a couple of reasons. I think the first reason is it is a tribute to my late father. So he was a South Vietnamese C-130 pilot. And the intent all along was he was going to fly that last flight out with his family. Unfortunately, he never got out. He didn't make it with us. So my hope was by sharing this story with others, we can in some small way keep his memory alive. I also wanted to just publicly thank just this wonderful, great country. I know there's a lot going on in the world right now, but I just wanted to remind people of all the good that the United States has, that America has. It's this country that welcomed us when we were in our most desperate time of need. And also just to publicly thank the Vietnam veterans, right, who have sacrificed and served and helped so much. And I just wanted to make sure that, their sacrifices and service were called out as well. And last but not least,
you had me crying on my own podcast.
Yeah.
No.
And the last reason that I will share is I wanted to make sure that we could document our history, at least in our family and our culture. People don't like to talk about bad things or bad times, but I wanted to make sure that my two sons could really appreciate their heritage and appreciate what they have today. So it's a long answer, but there were multiple reasons.
No, but and you inspire me. I'm first generation American. My grandmother was Jewish and Russian Jew. They fled the Bolshevik Revolution, or during the Bolshevik Revolution, she ended up in Berlin during World War II. So the stories, and I try to tell my kids the stories I remember, write them down because it is history and the things that happen. I mean, both my grandparents survived, but I think our kids here growing up in America don't realize what happened 50 years ago or longer in other countries.
Indeed.
Right. And I'm thankful too that I've had the opportunity to grow up here and live here and be successful. So I want to talk about your dad because he just sounded like an amazing, amazing man. So this is your time to tell us all about how incredible he was and his plan to save your entire family.
Well, Christina, I was 3 years old. So I think my biggest, regret is I don't know what's less painful maybe, but I wish I had more memories of him, but then I would probably miss him more. I mentioned I have two boys, but as they were growing up, that's when I realized the full magnitude, I think, of his absence. But he and my mom, I think it was love at first sight, right? When they met, and he was adored by my entire family, including my grandparents. And it was the C-130 we flew out was actually hidden in a hangar because it was under repair. So no one even knew about it. So it was the only working plane. So I think he was desperate to make sure we got out okay and that we could have a better future. Um, and he was going to do whatever it took, sacrifice whatever he made, and he paid the ultimate sacrifice. But by doing that, we and so many other families were able to live a better life here. My aunt tells me that when I was younger, as a toddler will do, I would wait for him to come home and I would hide in the exact same spot every single day and jump out and act like, I was surprising him. He pretended that that was the first time it ever happened. Um, so unfortunately, I have very few memories, but
Yeah.
I feel his absence always.
I'm sure. And I lost my dad right after college, and I truly believe I've had a guardian angel my whole life. Like things, he's just here, and things have just always kind of worked out. Not nothing's perfect, but I've always believed he's here. So I hope you've been able to find some peace that maybe he's in your boys somehow, or
Yes.
that he's still with you.
Yes.
Uh, do you think that your father, or maybe was he able to repair that plane that was hidden so
So
that he could get you out?
it was flyable. However, for example, it was missing the door, so you couldn't shut it. And because for example, that the door, they call it a man door, I think on the C-130, I think they had a sheet. So we had to fly at 10,000 feet level. So not very, that's not where we're supposed to be. But we were able to make it to Thailand. So it was barely flyable, but it was enough to get everybody out. And that plane was packed to over capacity.
So this was your father's dream. His legacy was to get you out, but he never made it home that day to get you out. So what have you heard? Obviously, you don't remember much at 3, but I know you've interviewed your family
Sure.
and the friends that were there. So tell us how that day. What did that day look like?
It was completely chaotic. I think people realized that the Viet Cong, the communists, were coming into the city, and for a lot of people that were helping the Americans, I mean, I think you'll see it in historical records. People were shedding their uniforms everywhere, right, because they didn't want to be found out. So it was just chaos, and my dad was stuck at the airport. It's called Tan Son Nhut Airport in Vietnam because they were shelling, and he was just waiting for that opportunity, a break in the shelling, to come get the family and bring them back. Um, so the intent all along was he was going to pilot that plane. So he got me, my mom, my younger brother, who at the time was 18 months in diapers, um, my grandmother, and the 3 brothers, my 3 uncles, who are all amazing. My grandfather decided to stay behind. He had a big business. He had a rubber plantation. He was like, oh, too much to lose. Not ready to give it up yet. So he stayed behind along with my aunt, her husband, who's a Marine, and her 2 sons. But anyway, we left. We got on the plane. Like, it was apparently packed to capacity. We were all huddled together. We were definitely overweight as far as what it could hold. And then my understanding was they were trying to back up the plane out of the hangar, but a truck or a van was in the way. Okay. The last image that my mom and my uncles remember, they saw my father go up into the cockpit. So they figured, okay, he's in the plane. He's on the plane. But I guess at some point he got off, and we've never been able to confirm 100%, but we believe that he got off to move that truck so the plane could back up. Okay. And in the process, because it was so chaotic, I'm sure, you've seen footages of people when they're so desperate, they probably wanted to get on the plane. I don't know if he tried to stop him, but the thinking was he was shot. He was shot and killed. So, but however, the plane took off because the co-pilot was there. We were able to take off. We made our way to Thailand, and it was there that when the plane landed, my grandmother got off, and she overheard some women that were on the plane talking, and they said, that was horrible, but the poor pilot was shot on the tarmac. And so she actually decided not to tell my mother because she was afraid that she would stay and not proceed on the journey to leave and would keep the kids, all of us with her. So she held on to that
Oh,
until we were in Guam. So that's how my mom found out, though.
wow.
Yeah. So she thought he was flying the plane the whole time.
Oh, and your mother, I can't imagine that. And was your grandfather ever able to find out what really happened to him?
No, um, I'm sure. I wish I could have talked to those women, but I think everybody's
Yeah.
scattered to the winds. Like you could be anywhere, in the world. Um, but that was what we believe happened. But there's no like confirmed. This is just all hearsay. But
So how many people were on that plane? How many people did your dad save?
it's got to be in the hundreds. I mean, it was over
Oh
capacity.
my God.
Yeah.
Wow. That in light of everything that happened, that has to make you have some sense of pride that your dad would do everything, sacrifice his own life to save his family. And there were probably people he didn't know on that plane.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I'm always thankful and grateful.
Wow. Yeah. So you come to the United States. Now your mother is a widow. She's
Yes.
got a 3-year-old and an 18-month-old.
Hmm.
You're in a kind of probably don't speak the language. What now? Did you have anybody here, family, anything? Then what's this next step for your family?
That's a great question. So, Christina, we actually ended up in Falls Church, Virginia, because my mom's first cousin was married to an American. Okay, and he worked for the, I don't know, one of the government agencies. So that, and because you're sponsored, then you can come right to this server area. And this is ironic, but maybe it's a little bit of good fortune in those crazy times. But when we ended up at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas. We went from Thailand to Guam to Hawaii to San Diego to Fort Chaffee, all within I think 2 weeks. And we ended up in Falls Church, Virginia, because of that connection. But apparently, when we arrived at Fort Chaffee, it's like they're processing everybody, right? Like there's an influx of refugees, and um, as luck would have it, my mom runs into an American who was married to one of our neighbors, and he saw her, found out what happened to my mom's, her husband, my dad, and expedited our whole processing and helped us get here quicker. Um, but when we got here, like you said, Christina, I mean, we didn't have anything. All the men in our life were gone. My uncles were teenagers, it was 13 and then 9. Those are the age gaps. But my grandpa stayed behind. My dad, he was, as I mentioned, a pilot. When pilots would have flight suits, there's a lot of pockets with zippers everywhere. So he had put all the money, cash, jewelry, everything on his flight suit. So we literally had the clothes in our bag. But fortunately, we were able to come to Falls Church, Virginia, and we stayed at our cousin's house. His name was David Payne, and we lived there for a while. No one knew the language, and everybody was dispersed, And Falls Church Presbyterian Church also came into the picture not too long afterwards. It helped us as well to sponsor our family. But we, for example, lived in the house next to the church. But we were always so amazed how people you have never met before, right? They welcome you. They don't ask for anything. They just want to help you. So I apologize for being a little emotional, but it's just it's just there's so much good in people.
Right. Right. And people do forget that,
Mm-hmm.
that there truly is. So what happened? And did your mom start working?
Yes.
You guys had to go to school. Obviously, at 3, you can pick up the English language very quickly.
Yes.
I'm sure, just
Yes.
being immersed in it.
Exactly. So it was very organic for my brother and I because we were very young. But my mom, she, there's a lot of French influence in Vietnam, right? And it was a French colony at some point. And so when she was growing up, she learned French. So she was fluent in French and Vietnamese, and she ended up getting a job with the World Bank, so she could also apply her language skills, and then her English obviously was got much better over time as well. But like my grandmother, she was almost 50 years old. Here she is starting over, going to Vietnamese school, English school at night. Um, but we had a lot of community support, like I mentioned, with the church. And then and we had 12 people, Christina, living in one house with a bathroom. My grandfather eventually made it over, but we lived
I was going to
together.
ask you
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Mm-hmm. He made it over by
So how
boat.
did he, I was going to say, how did he get out? Wow.
He made it over 2
And
years
that's
later.
scary.
Yeah.
How long was the boat ride?
Oh my gosh. I think it was a couple of weeks. We actually are trying to translate his journal now, but they ended up in Brunei. My understanding was it's almost like a Hail Mary because you just get on this boat, you have to escape at dark, and you just hope for the best. And I guess they came across an Italian tanker that saw them and gave them some food and water, and they ended up in Brunei, and that's how we got connected. So we reunited 2 years later.
And people listening and watching, these stories are what make our country. These people who got here. One of my best girlfriends was a Cuban refugee,
Oh, wow.
And she has a similar story. A boat over capacity. She was 7, so she remembers a little bit, and it was weeks and weeks, and the captain of the boat died, and her father took over the boat and got them to Puerto Rico. Same kind of thing, like saved hundreds of people, but we don't realize and how close these stories are. These aren't generations and generations ago.
Right.
These are our parents lived this, our grandparents lived this. And it's just the history is just so important, I feel, to our country and who we are. And I'm glad your grandfather made it. That's definitely, it must have been great for your mother and your grandmother.
Oh, it was probably, it was a very joyous time. I mean, just so thrilled just to see him again.
Yeah. And then writing the book, it was someone who kind of egged you on to do that. So talk about that, because I'm so thankful that you did write this book and tell the story.
Yeah. So my co-author, Jason Knowlton, he and I, we met because our boys were in Boy Scouts together. And, it was just a casual conversation. Usually when people ask me, like, hey, we'll tell you about your family. How come you don't talk about your dad? I just say, oh, he passed away when I was really young, and I just cut it. But for whatever reason, I decided to tell him the full story. And he said, we have to write a book about this. And I was like, oh, come on. You're joking me. But he just said, no, seriously, we should tell this story. And we just started on this path. I mean, and Christina, it took us 10 years. This was not something we did overnight. So
wow.
it started with a conversation, and, I started it late into my, and I was well into my 40s. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm working, I've got kids, but I was like, you know what? What's wrong with having like a dream, right? Like, let's just try. Let's just chip away at it. And to be honest, it took a lot to convince my family to even talk about it. And so that came with time.
I was going to ask you, is there something in your, quote unquote interviews with your family? What was the most surprising or compelling story that you heard from that time?
I think I just love to hear about what their life was like in Vietnam, and together.
And what was their life like?
A really good life. So, and then I realized that I understood how hard it was for my grandfather and my grandmother to start over, so I think they were well-to-do. And this is in the book, but my uncles, they're a bit of little troublemakers in the neighborhood, but they were telling all the stories that they would have, with the neighborhood kids, like letting up balloons on fire, popping them, swimming in the water tank, stirring up the water so everybody had brown water to bathe with and drink. But it's like, I just loved how even in this crazy time, they still had a really great childhood, and they were just kids, and we didn't share that until we started talking with interviews. And then one person's memory would jog another person's memory. And I could just then visualize, like, oh, what life must have been like. And also imagine if this hadn't happened, what my life would be like if the war hadn't happened. I'd still be there. I wouldn't be here with you, obviously, so.
Did you record the interviews with everybody?
We did. We did. We have
Yeah,
hours of interviews. Um, and it,
that's really cool.
yes, yeah,
That's
it's a lot
that's
of
one
detail.
thing I regret. I don't have. I have pictures. I have my aunt, detailed who everyone in the family was. But similarly to you said, your father had put everything in his flight suit. My grandmother, they were well to do in Russia. They
Oh,
owned a
wow.
store, and she literally sewed all the jewelry in her dress and her coat,
Oh,
and that's what she fled with. And she was a teenager. Never saw her mother again.
oh, I'm sorry.
So people don't realize the impact of war, and like you said, the crazy world we're living in now. But there are people living that, and
Yeah,
you're truly blessed to come here and have people help you and your
yeah,
family. And you went to college. You have a great job. You're living the American dream.
absolutely. No, I'm eternally
Yeah.
grateful for just living in this country and all the opportunity it provides.
So in the book, like, I see this as a movie, by the way. I just, you can visualize when you guys get
Ah,
the book, when you read the book. No, but you can just see, you know, I just envision your mother. I mean, I've had a 3-year-old and an 18-month-old, and trying to pack probably, a change of clothes, maybe a diaper, anything.
yeah,
These you're
yeah.
just grabbing and running out the door.
Literally I mean, you are fleeing for your lives. So yeah, yeah. It's not. I
Does your
mean,
mother talk about that in detail? Like, can she get past that and share what that day was like?
well, it took her probably like 40 years. Like honestly, until we started doing the interviews, she told you a little bit, and then my mom said during this process, like the reason why she never shared it before is she didn't want people to pity her, you know. But I was like, Mom, it's not about pity; it's about strength, you know. So, but I think when we started talking, it became therapeutic, and then I felt like it kind of brought us closer together because we were learning things about each other for the first time. Here I am, almost 40 plus years later, and we're still learning about that time and more about each other. So I'm so grateful for that, and then I realized, oh my gosh, now they're like, oh my gosh, now we can really understand different perspectives, and then the full context can be built because there are different people from their point of views.
Right. Wow. It is a fascinating story and book. And have you gone back?
Yeah, actually, I did go back in 2017. I went
Okay.
back with my husband Scott, my two sons Jake and Chase, and we took my mom back.
Oh,
Yeah,
that had
so
to have been so emotional for her. I can't imagine just reliving that.
yeah, I think it's bittersweet, and it's interesting because our home in Saigon is still standing. So we went there, and
Wow.
it's actually now a government building. They have it's a gated compound. They put closures, and we were just sitting out there looking at it, take pictures, and I was like, wow, what could have
Wow.
been, So, but it's still
Right.
there, But
And
obviously,
how amazing that you could share that with your boys.
oh yes, no, that was a trip of a lifetime, and the memories will definitely be cherished.
Wow. How are you getting the word out? Next year is the 50th anniversary of this. I want everyone
Oh, thank you
to
so much.
read your story and hear it. And again, it's what the American dream is, and your family. It's just such a great story.
Thank you so much, Christina. Well, we've done a couple of engagements. We've been
Yeah.
keynote speakers at a Welcome Home Vietnam Vets ceremony,
Awesome.
and we've got a couple more lined up. We did something on WJLA TV, the morning show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, I'm talking to you right now, and this is usually this, by the
Yes.
way, so easy and effortless. I feel like I've known you forever. Um, and just having some engagements with some various companies like for their DEI initiatives as well. So it's just everything's been very organic, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is, send it out to Hollywood. Find somebody out there, because it's
I
for
would. That would be
even a
another
documentary.
dream come true. Trust me. Yes.
Yeah.
We never in a million years thought this would even get published, honestly. But this is everything has been great. Like the fact it was documented, that was a good enough for me. And just talking to you now,
Yeah.
it's just thrilling.
It's so good. And I love that you recorded everything, because my creative PR brain is thinking, oh yeah, that could be a documentary. And then sitting down and, actually hearing it coming from, your mother and the friends and people who were on that plane. Well, it's amazing. Congratulations that you could share your family legacy with us. And like I said, I'm sure for your boys, again, I've got 2 kids, so I know how important that family legacy is.
Couldn't agree more.
Good for you.
Thank you so much.
So we wrap up every episode with the same 2 questions. What is the greatest thing that you have accomplished since you turned 50?
Well, I would say it's getting this book published. As I mentioned, it was a 10-year journey, and we never took no for an answer. We heard no a lot. We talked to a lot of publishers over many years. COVID did not help, but it only takes one yes. So don't stop.
And we're building a demographic of younger listeners, women in their 20s and their 30s. And I speak to college students all the time. And that is such an important message. You are going to hear no. If you think you are a failure when you get one no, you've got to, buckle up, kids, because there's a lot more, and persistence and passion. That's
right.
That's what makes stuff happen. And good for you. Okay. Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Well, I hope to be walking down on that red carpet at hopefully at the Academy Awards, and maybe this movie, it'll become a movie. And not so much for the personal aspect. I would just want to encourage people to tell their story, right? Because before this book was written, at least Uncommon Cargo, most of the books about the Vietnam War were based on the American GI perspective. I'm not saying that's not important, but there's so many other human interests and personal stories out there. So I just hope that just by hearing this, it encourages other people to also share their stories, because there's so much more similarities than there are differences, And
stories. We've had people on here and talking about your legacy and your story. And if you don't tell it, whether you write a book, whether you talk into a phone, it's going to be gone. And we have the technology now to leave our lasting legacies with our families for generations. And that's exactly what you did, which is so awesome. Who would be the dream actor to play your dad? I'm totally putting you on the spot.
Oh my gosh. Holy smokes. That's a great question.
He just seems like such a hero to me. Like just I picture him as this handsome pilot. I don't know. I just from reading the book.
You can help me with the casting, because no one's ever asked me that. But yes, no, in my mind, he's bigger than life. Right? That would be a really hard role to cast. So, but I would hope I can have some input into it.
Yes. Oh, you will. This will happen. We've just put it out into the universe. This Uncommon Cargo will be a movie.
I love it. I love the positivity. Yes.
Oh, gosh. Well, Eva, thank you so much for joining me. What an amazing story, and congratulations on your book. Uncommon Cargo. Everybody grab it, read it. It's so good. Thank you for listening or for watching this episode of Living Ageless and Bold. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit subscribe. And if you like the episode, I hope that you will give us a great review. You can also head over to livingagelessandbold.com and sign up for information, inspiration, and exclusive opportunities for us, women over 55. Thanks for listening. And remember, no matter what you do, keep living ageless and bold.